The story of Easter may be a myth, literal truth, history mixed with metaphor, or many other things. I believe that Easter is a verb, which may be a wild and confounding thing to say, but I've preached on verbs before. Some of you might have heard it. Gerunds, to be precise. Do you remember me speaking about gerunds way back in the day? But for you to have any hope of going along with this idea that Easter is a verb, I'm going to begin by sharing an abbreviated version of what's told and embodied during the Christian Holy Week. This is not a once upon a time story. It rumbles and rattles and provokes us in today's context as well. Let us begin. In the period leading up to Jesus' death, as the story goes, Jesus had been traveling to Jerusalem. He knew what lay ahead of him. He knew that every step along the way put him closer to being tortured by the hands of the ruling empire. The priests in Jerusalem were in cahoots with the colonial power. These priests not only officiated over the religious life of the Israelites, they were also rulers and judges, and they were paid agents of the colonial power, Rome. They couldn't allow any disturbances, couldn't allow any hope to crack open, couldn't allow any chance that people would rebel and rise up. So Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem was a major threat. As one biblical scholar put it, Jesus was disrupting, causing trouble, offering teachings that were fundamental to Jewish life. He was centering the core tenets of his faith, his community, and the lessons he learned every Shabbat as a child. He was living, walking, breathing, inhabiting the totality of his tradition. But he was challenging it too, provoking it, questioning it, living it deeply and uncomfortably, confidently and publicly. Love your neighbors, heal the sick, feed the hungry, welcome the stranger. People were noticing. People were hearing. Ordinary people, poor people, the downcast, powerful people were noticing too. No rebellion comes quickly out of a fractured people. Colonial domination counts on that. Jesus needed to suffer the greatest form of cruelty that Rome used. He was beaten and he was nailed to intersecting pieces of rough wood, left to die in agony as crowds cheered and mocked him, King of Kings. Eventually, Jesus was taken down and he was brought to a tomb. These weren't buried in the ground like we know today. They were carved out of a rock, almost like a cave. Jesus was brought into this place, and some men rolled a large and heavy stone in front of the opening to keep it secure. Early the next morning, Mary Magdalene and other women set out to visit the tomb. They had been up all night, cooking and talking and remembering his life, preparing spices and perfumes and oil to pour over his body. They came to honor their friends and their teacher and to say a final goodbye. Most of Jesus' other followers had scattered and were laying low, afraid of their lives. When the women arrived, they saw that the large and heavy stone had been rolled away. They steeled themselves before stepping inside, and Jesus was not there. No body, says the story, just an empty tomb. They cried, confused, desolate at their loss. What had happened? Then they remembered what Jesus had taught them. They remembered his promise, his love. They remembered their hope, and their courage. By bearing witness, these women were open and willing. They felt and saw and experienced what should have been impossible to believe. They embodied joy and possibility and commitment despite not a clear or even understandable path forward. What do we, as Unitarian Universalists, do with this Easter story of this risen Jesus? We, whose tradition has historical roots here in these Gospels with these people, we too have wrestled with its theology. What do we do today when we have Christian Unitarian Universalists in our congregations who sit side by side with many who insist the resurrection is only a myth? As Lisa Day so beautifully shares, you use default to telling an Easter story that appeals to reason, because reason tells us that life precedes death and death itself is final. But our experience of second chances, of cures, of recovery, forgiveness, and reconciliation tell a bit of a different story. When even life as we have known it is destroyed forever and hope has abandoned us, somehow life has held us and breathed us into new being. Life has called us to rise in fullness, triumphant, humble, grateful, insistent life who will not let us go. And this is me now talking, I am neither a Christian nor a complete disbeliever, because I know from being a creature of the earth, who is interdependent with all of life, life who will not let me go. Life that insists that the wildly improbable, the seemingly impossible, can't be imagined actually and absolutely has to be made possible, has to be imagined, has to be made into being, because otherwise, what? What? Climate change destroying our planet? Hate and othering separating us, tearing us apart? That can't be the only way. Because otherwise, how can we build the beloved community and realize collective liberation and know that we and all of our neighbors, our transkins, people of different faiths and no faith, are home and loved and safe and thriving on a planet that we all coexist in harmony with? If that is not a miracle, I don't know what is. And if we can't imagine that, what's the point? Insistent life pushes our imagination and our wonder to go further, pushes us to accept that impermanence is the only truth. And what a miraculous truth it is. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is fixed. Change is always happening, always possible. Nothing is inevitable. Nothing is a foregone conclusion. In this impermanence, we can practice resurrection like the mad farmer, because we know that 2 inches of compost is a magical alchemy that grows trees and strawberries from what started out as huge piles of crap that no one saw use for otherwise. We practice resurrection when we enter into the darkness of the tomb and ask, how might we emerge, we as individuals, we as community, how love might emerge from the darkness of the tomb. We practice resurrection when we dare to glimpse the world as it could be, and we turn that vibrant image into brave and powerful and bold action that creates community and that drives a revolution. This ancient story of the final week of a rabbi whose life and death is full of paradoxes and promises matters because it teaches us to embrace wild, exuberant, big, desperately necessary possibility. Easter is a verb because of possibility, of imagination, of faith, faith in a promise, faith in people, faith in what might happen. As Kendall Gibbons shares so powerfully in these lines that I want to close with, these lines from The Humanist Speaks of Easter. The crucifixion is not a story with a happy ending, nor was it a one-time event. It happens over and over as the human journey unfolds. It happens to us and to the people we love. It happens to the righteous and the innocent. Crucifixion happens and it feels like the end of the world every time. It feels like nothing could matter anymore ever. And then, inevitably and miraculously, something happens next. Something happens. Of course it does, because the world hasn't ended yet. Life happens, keeps happening. The dead don't rise, but we do. Hope rises, community rises, you rise, we rise, life rises. Not because death isn't real, crucifixion is not just pretend, but something else is just as real, maybe even more real. Something happens next. Life rises, outrage rises, love rises, faith rises, tears rise, hope rise. This I do believe. This I do believe. May it be so. And amen.